Welcome everyone to the first in the current D6 workshop series, and I am delighted to be joined by Justin Howard-Sneyd, MW, who is going to tell us all about regenerative viticulture. So a couple of points just before Justin gets started. First is that he will be happy to share his slides with you all afterwards. It might just not be straight away because he needs to check with a couple of the people who have provided source material that they're happy to share that. So any screenshots that you take, please do keep that information confidential. We would appreciate that. And then the second thing is that obviously you will need, if you do quote Justin from today's class, you will need to reference that in your assignment. And I will send around a suggested way of referencing this session. So that will be in the email that comes with the replay. So whether you're watching us live or on the replay, you are very welcome. And I will hand over to Justin to tell us a little bit about himself and about his involvement with RV. Hi, Justin, welcome.
Hi, Anne, and thank you very much for inviting me along. And I really appreciate the chance to talk to such a knowledgeable group of people who are just about to get their diplomas, which is fantastic. First of all, just apologise for my croaky voice. I was selling wine at the weekend. It had 100 people in my house and it got a bit out of hand. And I had to raise my voice quite a bit and I've slightly lost my voice. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Just to kind of very brief recap, I'm a London-based master of wine. I do lots of different things. I wear lots of hats. I have worked in a very commercial context as a buyer, but the last 10 years or so, I've been an independent consultant. I make my own wine in the south of France. This is one of my vineyards behind me, our Carignan block. I think it's really important to say quite early on that I haven't been immersed in the world of regen until about 3 years ago when I started really learning up on it, because I was working with Dartington in Devon, who have quite a good regenerative culture, and we were doing some courses down there, and I started learning about regen and became absolutely fascinated by it. We are also very early in the stages of trying to implement some regen practices in our vineyard, so you're not looking at a perfect regen vineyard behind you by any means, and hopefully we'll make a lot more progress in time to come. So I've been putting together from lots of sources. I do a certain amount of teaching and educating on this, and I've got loads of slides, and I talk quite quickly as well. So I'm also expecting you guys to be keeping up, and I think you've got the recording to watch back if you're a little bit confused, you want to go with something again. I will need to check with a couple of the people who supplied the slides that they're happy to use them, and I'll pull out any that in some way are unhappy to do that. So please, as Anne said, be sensitive to that. So I'm going to show you a few slides, and we're going to talk through them. And please drop questions in as we go. I'll try and keep an eye on that. And if anyone asks anything particularly pertinent that I haven't noticed, and has promised to jump in and tell me. So hopefully you can now see a slide which talks about regen viticulture and the research assignment. So my job isn't to answer your research assignment for you, but I hopefully will talk about a lot of things that are really relevant and really going to be helpful, and a really good place to start looking and thinking. And just to start off by saying that I am a trustee and have been for just Thank you, Anne, for sending me that curveball. I think you muted me briefly and I unmuted myself. So hopefully you can hear me now.
Apologize for that. That was my fault. Yeah, I meant to mute myself because I live on a main road. You'd think I would know. I've been using Zoom long enough. Apologies.
No problem at all. Well, look, if hopefully there won't be too much noise going on in my background. We have the aeroplane and the odd Labrador. I have a small Labrador who might be barking at me, but I think Amanda, my wife, is looking after him. So I've been a trustee of the foundation for just under 3 years. Our mission is to work with nature, which is very much the regenerative approach, to create a sustainable future for vineyards, growers, and the planet. And we want to do that by inspiring the transition towards regen, by using science and great communication, and also really good support tools for growers to show them what can be done and how to do it. So that's a relatively new charity, international charity. Is registered as a charity in the UK, but we've got trustees from all around the world, and I'm really pleased to be working with them because they're doing some fantastic work. Now it's not letting me move. I have to click the screen. There we go. So I guess the diploma topic is what are the aims and how are they achieved? And what are the commercial advantages and disadvantages? It also asks you to give us a personal opinion. So I don't know how far down the road you are learning about regen. It takes a little while to kind of get to understand what it really is, and hopefully I can really help with that. But it does invite you to then take a view. And I think with any of these things, you probably should take a view that's decidedly pro or decidedly anti. And I think it's valid to take that view. You just need to argue it well and say why you don't think it's a suitable approach. Obviously, I would disagree with you, but other people might not. So don't be afraid to challenge, and don't be afraid to ask difficult questions, because it's important that we don't just take these things because someone says so that they must be good and just believe it. So ask skeptical questions is always a good tip. So I'm, again, going to try and delve into some of these things. I'll talk quite a lot about how the aims are achieved, a little bit at the beginning about the principles, and we'll touch on various aspects as we go through the commercial side, because that's also quite important, but I'm not going to go into deep detail on that, and you probably need to do some more research. So it's really, I just wrote this today, and I've kind of off the top of my head pulled together various sources. And I think what regenerative is intentionally trying to do is to be a true sustainability in vineyards. And that really means that you can keep doing what you're doing for 500 more years or more. I mean, why wouldn't you aim for that? That's what sustainability really means. And the problem is we've been running out of road with lots of aspects of what we do, particularly to do with the environment and actually to do with the health of our population. And regenerative thinking is absolutely trying to create a system that is stable and is going to look after itself, or be easy to look after for hundreds of years. So you're actually looking to have a regenerated ecosystem in a vineyard and around a vineyard, and not just think of it as an extractive exploitation. So you're not just making the best financial use you can out of a piece of land and stripping it of all of its value. You're actually trying to have something that maintains its value over time and works like an ecosystem rather than just an economic unit of production. And that probably means giving equal weighting to people and planet as well as profit. You've got, but profit has to have an equal weighting too, because you cannot carry on doing. Someone once said, I think it was James Milton in New Zealand, you can't be green if you're in the red. So you've got to be able to make money from it, and it's got to be sustainable profit-wise as well as for the people and the planet. And the output really is that you end up with a healthy and resilient vineyard, one that you don't have to replant after 20 or 25 years because it's got trunk disease or it's got some serious health issues. One where the vines are deep-rooted and self-supporting and not needing too much in the way of inputs, and resilient to drought and resilient to diseases and weather, what the weather can throw at them. Obviously, some weather throwing some pretty difficult curveballs at vineyards these days, so it's not always possible to guarantee that, but part of the purpose of regen is to make your vineyard more resilient. And obviously another important output is that the grapes taste great and the wine you make is worth a premium price. That is quite hard to prove, and most of the evidence so far is what you might call anecdotal evidence or correlative evidence. So I know in biodynamics there is quite a clear correlation that vineyards with biodynamic fetch a higher price for their wine. But does that mean that the wine is better, or that they're charging more, or that the story behind it is partly what helps them sell? We don't really know. So is there a causation or correlation? It's a bit early to say. And I think another aim really is, in this increasingly transparent world, it's very hard to do something that, in your heart of hearts, you'd rather not tell your customers. If you open the door to the storeroom in the viticulture centre of anyone's operation, and you'll find a cupboard full of chemicals and a hazmat suit, and that's not something that most people would really want to put on their Instagram. So how nice would it be to be able to operate without any of those dirty secrets that you don't really want to tell people? And that's part of, I think, what regenerative farming will help you to do. So clicking on. I just think it's really important to start. If you haven't absorbed too much about regenerative agriculture, it's just important to go back and remember that every single thing on this planet exists here because the sun is shining, and the sun has now plants that exploit that sunlight and turn it into energy in the form of sugars, and they grow themselves, and then they feed animals and a huge amount of life in the soil. And it's all that ultimately comes from the sun, and everything that we're living on at the moment, the fossil fuels, all came from the sun in the past, and it's all buried in the soil. Now that solar radiation is really important to remember, because it drives the most important aspect of regen, which is that soil life needs the power of plants to pump carbon into the soil to feed the soil microbiology, and without that you don't have a healthy soil. So So all energy in a regen system comes from the sun, in any system. It's really important to have enough water because plants will not transpire without water. So you either have to be able to irrigate or have enough water during the growing season that the plant doesn't just shut down and give up. And that's been a problem in a few areas recently, particularly where we are in France. Another key principle that makes it different is that the nutrition that the plant needs should be provided by the soil microbiome. It's very common in modern viticulture to add whatever nutritional input you need, whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, or micronutrients. Go to a chemical company, buy a couple of bagfuls of nutrients and stick them on the plant, and off you go. And that's all very well, but it actually doesn't do great things for your soil microbiome. If you have the soil microbiome doing it for you, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a bit, then you don't need external nutrition. And the job of humans is to try and use their intelligent interventions to kickstart the ecosystem and to make things really start to work by themselves. And that requires understanding what to do and just chipping in the right thing to help the organisms that are already trying to do what you want them to do at the right time. Again, difficult to do, easy to say, difficult to do. Obviously, vines are very susceptible to fungal diseases, and that is an issue. That means that we end up using quite a lot of chemicals. And people often think that viticulture is a lovely thing and a lovely way to use a piece of land, but actually don't realize quite how pesticide hungry it actually is. It's responsible for much more than its fair share of pesticide treatment in Europe. And the avoidance of those, if possible, is clearly a good. But I think one of the tenets of regen is that if a disease is actually going to wipe you out completely, then it's your choice as a grower whether you should use that treatment or not. Therefore, if you were organic and you used a certain treatment, you'd stop being organic. With regen systems, it's up to you to decide what the best balance is. And if you choose to use something, you should use it as little as possible. And in some conditions, you may never need to use it. And that may be your goal and aim. But just occasionally, like if your kids were ill, you would want them to get the best treatment. The regen philosophy sort of allows for that. So that, I think, is a real attractant to quite a few fugitive growers. It does require a slightly different way of thinking about things. It is effectively requiring systems thinking, which means thinking about a complex network of actions and interactions, whereby when one thing changes, multiple things are affected. And it's not a linear thought process of if this, then that. And that does require a slightly different way of thinking, and systems thinking is a sort of quite interesting new discipline to delve into if you're interested. It also requires you to take a holistic view of the achievement of the whole thing, and it's quite hard, therefore, to isolate individual effects of what happens if you do this and what happens if you add that. It's actually a complex mixture of different actions and reactions, and not just one thing. And it does also require hard work. I've said hard work. A couple of growers I speak with on a reasonably regular basis actually say it's a lot easier farming regen. You have to do less. Once you've got it working, it sort of hums away and does its own thing, and you actually have to do a lot less tractor driving, a lot less trimming. Your vineyard looks a bit messier, but you actually work less hard. But to get to that point, you have to work hard, and you have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on and understand it as well. And that is difficult, and difficult for some growers. So I'm not going to linger on this, but this is a slide from a New Zealand website that talks about kind of regenerative farming. And it, I think, is a really good summary of how the regenerative mindset differs from regular farming, perhaps. And perhaps let's start on the top right. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm pointing at sort of 1 o'clock, which is to plan for what you want, but start with what you have. And I'm very attracted to regen because it basically says wherever you are, really understand where you are, and then work out where you want to get, and then you can make a plan to move there. You shouldn't just try and apply something you've heard works well for someone else in a different context in your vineyard. You need to understand really what you've got to start with. Second principle is to maximize photosynthesis. Make sure your plant roots are you always have plants in your soil, and the roots are photosynthesizing and they're feeding your soil microbes, because without that, you are missing this opportunity to feed the microbes that will do all the work for you. Therefore, you need to minimize disturbance. You shouldn't plow your soil. There are exceptions, and there are cases where it's actually considered to be normal to plow, and even a good thing. And we can talk about that a little while. But generally, it's bad for your soil because it inverts all the organisms in the soil. It kills off a lot of them. You get this boost of fertility because things have died, and then they make the nutrients available to the plant, which takes them up and it grows nicely. But it's the best analogy is it's like a champagne bottle in the fridge. You open the bottle, put the bottle back in the fridge with a bung in it. If you take the bung out and shake it, lots more CO2 comes out. Put it back in the fridge, take it out again, shake it. You can keep doing that for a while until there is no CO2 left, and then the soil is the champagne is depleted of CO2, and the soil is also has reduced its carbon to a minimum level. So you're minimizing disturbance, you're harnessing the diversity in your ecosystem, in the vineyard and the land around it. Again, we'll talk a bit more about that. You're using your livestock, if you have them, and it's not common in vineyards, but again, we'll touch on that, not just to create a crop, a creature that you're growing for wool or for meat, but it's actually you're using it to actually make your land better. And so that's using livestock as a tool. Lots of great stuff. Alan Savory is probably the sort of leading experiment of mob grazing, but lots of interesting thoughts about how livestock can regenerate land. So you have a sort of open and flexible toolbox. New things that come along, robots, new technology is completely okay in regen. You want to be learning about what's new, what's exciting, and what is potentially going to be a game changer for you. So it's not a sort of fixed and rigid system. It's very much open to new ideas. Failing is really important. I don't know if any of you can remember some time in your life where you actually did really badly at something. It probably kickstarted a big learning curve, and failure therefore is the opportunity to learn. And learning together with other people accelerates your learning because you can learn off each other. So having local groups and visiting each other and checking out what each other's doing is a very important way for regenerative culture to spread. Another aspect is to question everything. Don't let anything go by you without thinking about it and asking a question. Remember the farm's a living system, and I think at the beginning we said make your initial decisions based on your context, which is effectively start with what you have. And this is a sort of circular system, but just a cup of tea brought to me. Thank you very much. So that is, I think, a great way to think. It was a good summary of how regenerative thinking in farming differs from perhaps more conventional thinking. There's a fantastic UK farming festival called Groundswell. It's become known as the Glastonbury of farming. It happens in north of London in June, and it's really energizing because there's fantastic people doing great things in agriculture. And agriculture is way ahead of viticulture. So there are only beginning to be now a few vineyard owners and vineyard consultants going along and now doing sessions at Groundswell. But it's something that I would think, if you want to accelerate your understanding of regen, get yourself up to Groundswell for a day. You can go for a day or over 2 days and stay the night. It's really, really interesting. I think you'll have a fantastic time. And it's probably in time for you to get the knowledge through, but for you to answer this really well, this topic. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to gallop through, and I'm certainly not going to read into everything. This is the RVF's website, and relatively recently we've just created something called the RV Guide, where we have 16 practices that we think are important in vineyards. And this chart on the right has actually got 18 things, but the certification and glossary at the beginning are kind of overall topics that talk about how to certify, and the glossary of the different words involved in regen. But the other 16 are all the practices that we recommend if you want to be as regen as you possibly can. And we'll talk a bit about the end about the number of vineyards that have now registered what their practices are, and you can look that up on the RVF website. So it's quite a good resource for that. And we'll talk into each of, well, not all of the 16, but the important practices in the next 40 minutes or so. Need to keep an eye on the time. Yes, we've done 20 minutes so far. So just thinking about your soil, we talked about the sun producing the energy that photosynthesis turns into plant matter, chlorophyll, woody stuff, sugars, etc. Your plant then exudes that through the roots into the soil. It produces leaves, it produces prunings, those fall on the floor. People will add compost and mulch or other organic matter, and it enters the soil and then is broken down by the microbial biomass and decomposed. Some of those things then return to the atmosphere, and some are stable in the soil and are effectively sequestered, which means they stay in the soil for a long period. And people talk about the short carbon cycle and the long carbon cycle. The short cycle is that which returns into the atmosphere in a year or two because it's decomposed and then is re-photosynthesized by the plant and brought back in. And then the long cycle, it can be hundreds of years. One of the opportunities of regenerative practice is to lock up more carbon in soil. And if anyone has watched, I do urge you to, if you haven't watched Kiss the Ground, which is a documentary on Netflix, I think it was, very, very good thing, good place to start to understand how carbon works, the carbon cycle, and how important it is to keep carbon in the soil. Here is just a list of some of the things that live in that soil. It's an extraordinary network of creatures. It's been said, and exactly which stats, I can't completely get my head around the numbers, but they do say in a teaspoonful of soil, you will have more living creatures than there have ever been human beings on the planet. Or is it more stars than there are in the solar system? I can't remember. It's a staggeringly large number because there are absolutely millions and millions of microorganisms. And of course, there's the plant material itself, there's fungi, which are visible, then there's bacteria, viruses, tardigrades. Anyone remember tardigrades? Incredible little indestructible semi-creatures. Algae, protozoa, arthropods, nematodes, earthworms, etc. They're all eating each other. They're all shitting and peeing. They're all living on each other's decomposing flesh. In the soil there is this incredible network of activity. And every time you plow it, you kind of disturb that. And every time you use fungal treatments and herbicides, you're really compromising that soil life. So this is getting this network effect to work for you is very much what Regen's about. Here are some pictures of those things in a little bit more detail. This is known as a soil food web. And if it's working well, those microbes are going to digest and cycle your organic matter. They're going to improve your soil structure and the depth to which your plants can root. They're going to recycle, solubilize, and retain the nutrients. They can get rid of toxins. They definitely will increase your water holding capacity. And this is a really interesting aspect of regen that some people I work quite closely with are getting quite excited by. If you can increase your soil carbon and your soil organic matter, the soil will hold. And I'll have to talk to Mimi Castile because she's got the number. I think it's 70,000 litres per hectare extra for every 1% of soil organic matter increase. That's a number well worth checking out and Googling because various studies have proved that. And that's a fantastic thing to know that when it rains, the water will stay in your soil, held in your soil, become available to your plant over time rather than just running off or just sinking deeper. You can also have byproducts that promote plant growth, and the soil food web also can protect plants from disease and sequester carbon. So very exciting things going on. These are all what we call ecosystem services, which are things that the ecosystem does for you without you having to put your hand in your pocket to buy chemicals or anything like that. So what is soil health and how do you measure it? Got a few slides here from Vinescapes, who are one of the UK's leading viticulture consultancies. They have two sites that they've been looking at, but they did a comparison. Site A, which was a very uncompacted site that had not been tilled, cultivated, or ploughed for many years, hardly used a herbicide, already had a very diverse mix of plants growing between the rows and under the vines, and only ever sprayed when they really needed to, so a reactive spray program. Whereas site B was a much more perhaps traditional vineyard and perhaps more commonly found in England with quite tidy short grass between the rows, weed-free under the vines. It had been fast established and given boosted with some nutrition, synthetic nutrition to make sure the plants grew quickly, sprayed regularly to make sure that there were no pathogens around, and the soil was quite compacted because the tractor was driving quite frequently on the land. And then after a few years, they started measuring quite big differences between the two. So this is a picture of A, the more perhaps regenerative vineyard, and B, the perhaps more conventional one. And there's obviously differences in other things. This is repeated by quite a few people across quite a few types of vineyards comparing each other, but this is just a good case study. So site A had a much higher earthworm count. I'm not going to go into the detail of how you measure your soil quality, but a lot of it is visual rather than analytical. If you can count earthworms, if the particle size is healthy in a soil, if you can dig a spade in easily, you've got porous, spongy soil with lots of microbial activity, and a moist but not waterlogged soil, that's a really good soil structure. Whereas site B, compacted, often over dry or waterlogged, and very little in the way of living organisms. Those are what the two different soils look like. Again, you have to be sort of trained in how to see what good versus less good is, but it's quite clay, blocky soil on the right, whereas nice bobbly, granular texture on the left, which is a good sign. And there's an app called Sector, which helps you do this analysis, and they're able to measure ask you that to actually, with your app, go and count earthworms, go and dig your spade in, and do all of these things and record the data. So clearly, site A had much higher earthworm counts than site B. Then the guys at Mindscape said, well, at site B, we can recover it. We just need to implement a plan, putting in brassicas, which obviously got some nitrogen. They sowed the seeds with a no-till drill, got the guys to buy a lighter tractor, spread a lot of compost, stopped using herbicides, and then actually put in weather stations so that they could really only ever spray when they really needed to, get the precise data that said how humid was it, how windy was it, and only spray when they really needed to. And so that's the plan that they put in place and have been running for a year or two now. And it's a bit early to see the results, but they're confident that that is going to change things. I'm very grateful to another vineyard, Albury, in the UK. So we've done a few events here in the UK with some of the English vineyards who are kind of headed down this path. Albury is actually biodynamic. Alex Valsecki, who's the vineyard manager, is fantastically open and enthusiastic and knowledgeable. And very much of what they do is fairly firmly within the thought culture of regenerative. So they also do biodynamic treatments, which is not part of the regen system, but they certainly don't do any harm, and they quite possibly do something quite surprising that we don't really know much about. But her practices across between 2012 on the left and 2021, and this is very small, and you may not be able to see it, and I'll check with Alex that she's happy to share it, but you can see the indexes where the percentage of each type of micronutrient was less than ideal in 2012. Many more of them have come into the normal or positive range by 2021. So that's quite clear evidence of significant difference. And I just got sent this literally 2 days ago by Stephen Cronk from Domaine Mirabeau, who just had a report in. He's been doing regen for 3 years, in spite of having a horrendous fire a couple of years ago, which burnt a lot of his vines, and a hailstorm just recently. He's really not had the luck. Just 3 years of treatment of his vineyards in a regenerative fashion that increased his biological activity from 0.7 on the left here to 7.5. That's a huge increase, as you can see. It's still not quite as good as it could be, but it's moving fast in the right direction. Sorry, let's get back. There we go. And at the bottom there, the scales had to move up. This is 100 and 200 here on the left. The scale on the right is 200 and 400 because they've already increased so much. So they got the fungivores up to well over 400 when before they were down at 30 or something. So massive increases in the soil life in that soil from just 3 years of growing cover crops, incorporating the cover crops, having animals in the vineyard grazing, and various other practices. It's really quite surprising how quickly you can make a difference. I'm just going to grab a cup of tea because I'm getting a bit croaky. So we actually are going on Thursday. There's an open day down at Everflight in Sussex, kind of quite near Plumpton. If anyone wants to come and join that, I think there's places. I think there were as many as 20 places, and I'm not sure how many people were signed up, but I think there's a couple of places at least. There is a slide at the end which tells you how you can book that, but it's only 20 quid for a morning in a real regenerative vineyard. So if anyone is listening to this in the UK and fancies going along to that, I think it could be it's really important to see things for yourself in person. It really makes it come alive. So just a small advert for that. And I've got a few slides that Luke shared. He arrived there, I don't know exactly which day, 2017 or 2018, I think. And with the owners was keen to implement a regenerative way of doing things and to not just become organic. They are not organic, but they have reduced so much all of their inputs. And this is an example of how you can reduce your inputs. So on the left in 2018, total inputs in terms of, kilos of different things. Green is herbicides, blue is fungicides, insecticides and foliar feeds. And then the inputs per hectare. Obviously they planted at some point, so they've grown their hectareage. And you can see 2019 and 20 really reduced their inputs. 21 was probably a more challenging year, put the inputs up significantly, nearly doubled the inputs per hectare, but then that's back down to well below the lowest ever in 2022. And I haven't seen a slide for 2023 yet. So spending a lot less money on insecticides, no synthetic fertilizer, using copper at the beginning, but not anymore. And they're achieving a pretty decent yield. It's not industry leading. You can get 8-10 tons per hectare in top vineyards in the UK, but 5.3 is above the average for UK vineyards. And these grapes have been grown regeneratively and making extremely high quality wine. So I think they're doing a fantastic job. Just delving a bit into cover crops, one of our regen days, we had King's guy from King's Seeds. One of the things you find if you go to Groundswell is that the seed companies have all been in 3 or 4 months beforehand and taken little meter sectors and sowed their seeds in that meter and put a little bit of string around it. And then all the plants in that come up. So by the time Groundswell comes along, they're all 1.5 foot, 2 foot high with all this wonderful mix of seeds. So of course, they're selling cover crop mixes, but specifying exactly what's in that mix and what's right for your soil, what's right for your vineyard is their skill. Those cover crops will cover your soil, they'll prevent it eroding, they'll increase the amount of biological life in the soil, increase the organic matter. I'm not going to read through all of this, but there's loads of things that they do. This is the ecosystem services that cover crops can bring. And actually, if they grow the right plants, the weeds that you don't want to grow will find it hard to grow because there's so many other plants competing with them. So they also look very nice. So Instagram does enjoy a few nice flowers flowering between vines, and your customers and visitors will massively respond well to seeing a burgeoning microclimate as they pass through your vineyard. Back to Everflight. When Luke started, or before he arrived, I think in 2016, they measured the organic matter at 3.1%. He had measured 10.9%, I think, 2 years ago when these slides were produced. And that was often a lot to do with sowing mixes of cover crops, 12 to 19 different species, and doing a little bit of tilling on occasion, sometimes to incorporate that cover crop in the soil. It's not banned. You should not never till. Sometimes it is a valid thing to do, but quite often you can actually get a very good result by flattening your crop and having it sort of develop a mat. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the benefits of that. Yes, well, one of the benefits is soil temperature. So this is less of a problem in the UK, where we don't often get our vineyards to be too hot, but in hot regions, on the same day, I don't know if you can easily read the thermometer on these pictures, but bottom left, where pretty much bare soil, is 40 degrees, the soil surface. Bottom right, where there's a decent amount more plant cover, 29. And then where there is green growing plants, 19.7, much, much cooler. And actually where there's a mat of plants that had been growing, had been flattened, but quite a thick mat of mulch, even lower still, 18.8 at the ground surface. So really massive differences. And that helps keep your soil retained, soil moisture retained, and keeps your soil microbiology healthy, because creatures do not like being shone by the sun and hitting 40 degrees. They definitely don't like that, and they will die as a result of that. Right. Another tool for regen is using compost and nutrition. And I talked about how you try to get your system working so everything is created internally on your farm. You don't need to bring out inputs from outside. So the best type of composting is one you can do yourself on your farm from your own production. If you've got land around it and you've got some forest, you can make wood chip, you can make biochar, the sorts of things you can do. But sometimes you do have to buy stuff in. So what compost can do is it improves your soil structure, it increases your organic matter, and it helps you retain water. This is information from a guy called Nick at Laverstock Park Laboratories. He's got a company called MyColife, and they analyze compost. So he knows where all the best compost in the UK is, the most active. And you can make what he calls super compost out of quite a lot of products that you can grow or in some cases buy, that are all organic and all naturally sourced, and that will make a massive difference to the biology in your soil. They'll really appreciate the food and the energy that these will give. So depending again on what you need, you can make up a mixture, compost it, and get an incredibly active super compost. These are some of the results he's getting in terms of active bacteria, fungi, hyphal diameter, total fungi area, fungi, etc. And you can measure. And he says you should, when you buy something, measure what's in it, because don't just buy the compost because you think it's coming from a reputable manufacturer. Actually get it measured and then see what it's doing. I work in the south of France with the guys at Diplomatherapy. So I'm not living there all the time. I'm not doing the day-to-day work in our vineyard, and the guys from Diplomatherapy do that, and they do it fantastically well. And while they're not yet implementing in my vines some of the practices that they're doing in their trial regenerative plots, they are doing some really, really good science about water retention and proving some really interesting things by using biochar. And they've had some great results. And this is just a brief slide that summarizes a few things, but 120 cubic meters of water per hectare increased by using biochar, two times the water retention in the soil, and 45% more vegetative growth, the same amount of water applied in the plots that had the biochar versus the one that didn't. And they're working with some very good scientists and regen specialists and experts to make sure that this is a robust and well done research. And I think there's more and more of this kind of thing coming out that kind of proves the case. Brief chat about weed control. So obviously herbicide use is something you want to avoid if possible. It's very common in English vineyards to spray your undervine strip because you do not want tall plants growing up into your canopy, strangling your grapes and being a bit of a disease trap. So somehow you've got to get rid of them, and it's just definitely easier to spray them with herbicide and then nothing grows there and problem solved. But there are better ways and more not energy intensive ways, you have to spend more time and effort, physical removal with various forms of mower, hand weeding in some cases, use of mulches, things that you can put under the vines to stop things growing through, and actually establishing a plant that will grow there, that you want to grow there, but doesn't grow tall, is probably the best long-term way to control what happens under your vines. And you still might have to go and hand pull a few of the nasty weeds that do turn up. Just checking how we're doing for time. And I'm rambling away. I'm just making sure that you are all still hearing me and everything's going okay. And we've got about 20 minutes left. Is it okay that we talk to an hour and then do questions after that?
Yeah. So I've actually said to people that we can go up to 90 minutes. So if you are free to do that, then, take your time. There is no rush. We'd rather you covered everything.
Okay, well, I'm definitely free for 90 minutes. I will try and finish talking somewhere around the hour mark, so that there then is time for questions and chat. So it would be great to have some of those thoughts and comments, and you can chip in with any questions you've got if you have questions too. So yeah, treatment of pests and diseases. So we talked a bit about how the vine is a susceptible plant. It's particularly prone to fungal disease. There are attempts to breed fungal resistance. Probably the most successful types of plants are ones known as pewees, which is a German word I'm afraid I haven't got it written down, so I can't try and even attempt to say it in German. But it's PEV is the German abbreviation for a fungal resistant strain. And nowadays they're hybrids. They're made by crossing a vinifera with a non-vinifera until you have the non-vinifera that has the fungal resistance. And then you back cross with more vinifera. You keep on crossing this mix with vinifera until you're breeding down the percentage of hybrid to really a tiny percentage, maybe less than 1% of the genetic material in the remaining plant is a hybrid. So it's 99% vinifera, but you keep on checking that you're keeping that fungal resistance gene. And if you still have it at the end of that time, then you have a successful plant that you think can grow well. Now, it isn't the same species as the original one you started with, but some of them are very vinifera-like and very high quality, and more and more of those are being tested. And imagine you could grow Chardonnay with no fungal disease problem. That would be a fantastic solution to the problem. And people's views differ on whether it's okay to use genetic manipulation to do that. Personally, I'm probably in favour. If you could take out the fungal resistance gene and put it into Chardonnay, that would be quite powerful. And yes, depending on the regime you're in and which country and what the rules are, whether that's allowed or not is to be seen. But it's certainly a lot easier to sell something that tastes like Chardonnay, looks like Chardonnay, and effectively is Chardonnay than it is to sell Solaris or Souvenir Gris or one of the new Kiwi varieties that takes a while to get people to name. But then again, there are people who are growing those varieties because they just don't want to spray, and they can get away with hardly spraying at all, maybe once or twice a year rather than 15, 16, 20 times a year, which they would have to do if they have vinifera. So that's one option. Another option is to try and find other products that you can spray that would not compromise your status as organic. So there's a lot of biologicals that are coming out now. The only issue I've got with this and with organics to some extent is if you have an effective antifungal, it is killing fungi in one way or another. And copper and sulfur in various different forms do have antifungal effects. And they're only allowed in organics because they're mined from the earth and therefore supposedly good chemicals. But actually they're quite toxic, copper particularly toxic in soil, and it builds up and is becoming quite a problem in quite a few areas. And a lot of organic growers are quite heavily reliant upon copper. So I don't think copper's great. I also don't think some biological controls that are toxic are necessarily good because they will kill your insect life. So, but there's such a wide range of new things coming out that have various functions and various forms of effectiveness, and they're busy being tested. And in some cases, they may be just the right thing for you, and they may really solve your problem without having to resort to a bag of chemicals. And I think the knowledge is really emergent here. But as I said, it's a complex system. And if you have a very, very healthy, diverse, complex system, what tends to happen is if you have a pathogen, something in your ecosystem will cope with the pathogen and prevent the pathogen becoming a problem. Whereas if you have a monoculture that's been, there's nothing else growing there, and one disease comes in that just tears through everything, you have a real problem. So this is one of the reasons that having a biodiverse ecosystem is really helpful. And just another slide that talks about plants have natural defense mechanisms. They will defend themselves against various forms of attack. And trying to stimulate those is perhaps a really good way to get your plant to protect itself rather than have to spray it with something to do the protecting for it. One example, I don't know how this is held up, but I remember someone coming saying they have a machine that blows hot air at vines. They drive it down the vineyard around flowering and at various other times of the year. And I don't know how hot the air was. It was sort of 60, 65 degrees, quite hot, but not going to kill or scorch the leaves. And just the very act of blowing hot air at the vine caused it to up its defenses itself. And really quite impressive differences in fungal disease and in yield. Very significant increases in yield that they had shown in their trials. Now, they were selling this equipment, so they obviously showed you the ones that worked. And I don't know if it's been held to be something that works, but I know that just walking past, spraying a vineyard with water can have an effect because the vine's got something that is attacking it and it reacts in some way. Salicylic acid is aspirin from willow. There's lots of small things that will actually get plants to develop their own cell wall thickening so that when the pathogen comes along, it can't get through. And that's a really promising area to look at. So biodiversity we talked about. I'm going to talk about ecosystem design. So having a monoculture of vines is not very healthy because it's really hard to get this complex biodiverse microclimate around if the only plant that's growing is vines. And if you go to Champagne or to Bordeaux, quite a few parts of intensive agriculture in France, there really is very little else growing there. And they're busy thinking about replanting trees and putting ditches back. This is the Everflight estate, and Luke shared this slide with a group of people last year. And it's a kind of ecosystem plan. You can see the rows of vines in blocks, and then there's various areas on the left, apple trees, the side of production. Up at the top there, there's an area which was really damp. And he and the owners effectively dug out some area where water can collect and create a kind of wetland. And there's not much point in trying to plant vines down there because they just won't thrive. It's a fairly flat plot, but that's the lowest part of it, and that's where the frost accumulates and it gets very wet. And then a lot of the green bits you can see are ditches, and some previous owner had filled in the ditches to be able to plant more, and they've excavated quite a few ditches, particularly around the perimeter, to divert the water around and to get it out so that they don't get waterlogged. And they've also got lots of areas where they've got biodiverse planting and trees and wetlands, and they're obviously also growing lots of crops and cover crops between the rows. So there really is quite a high degree of biodiversity on a piece of land like that, and at least 15% of it seems to be not dedicated to growing vines, but to the biodiversity that helps keep the ecosystem healthy. Just back to the Roussillon, where I'm from, this is some of the vineyards of Gerard Gobi. He's quite excited by what is known as agroforestry, vitiforestry, growing vines and trees in proximity. There are some no-nos, some species that don't work well. I think the walnut tree is famously not happy to have anything else grow around it, and it pumps something out of its roots that prevents other things thriving that grow in its shade. But olives, fruit trees are natural friends of the vine, and nowadays when Gerard Gobi plants a vineyard, he'll plant 5 or 6 rows of vines and then a row of trees as a matter of course. And he has birds that live in the vineyard that eat the main insect problems that he suffers from. So he doesn't tend to have great berry moth, odomeese, and that kind of thing, because the birds that eat them are thriving around the vineyard. So he's a very inspiring man with lots of interesting things going on, and yeah, well worth thinking about how you design and lay out your vineyard so that you benefit from these natural synergies. We talked a bit before about how a balanced ecosystem will have something in it that will prevent a pathogen or a disease or a pest from taking off. And this is a lovely example of, I think it's a mite of some sort or a fly on the bottom left that is predated on by a spider. And so every time the red graph goes up, these are generations of the pest organisms. The spider population peaks shortly afterwards, eats all the pests. They drop right down again. And then there's this kind of, what's the word, dance that goes on every time the pests take off, the spiders pick up. And you can generally see, particularly in the first sort of 30 months, 30 generations, I'm not sure what the time period is, the pests never really get to take off because there's always spiders there ready to react and prevent them taking off. Obviously, if you use insecticides or certain treatments, you kill everything. And then when the pest arrives, it's got absolutely nothing to stop it from going crazy. So this is one of the reasons that functional biodiversity is really, really useful. Another tenet of regen is to have animals in the vineyard and to use the manure and the hoof prints of the animals and the urine, which is quite nitrate rich, to rebuild the soil and to push seeds down into the soil with the hooves that then set and become part of the biodiversity. So animals in the vineyard is kind of pretty important. It's quite hard in vineyards. The main reason that being in the wintertime it's fine because nothing's growing and a small sheep is going to ignore a vine and not really try and nibble it. There's nothing to nibble. But as soon as bloodburst happens, so there's plenty of nice stuff to nibble. So bad idea to have sheep in your vineyards, except in the winter, unless you grow and trellis your vines very high where the sheep can't reach, or you put one of these Hannibal Lecter masks on the sheep. I'm not quite sure what the animal welfare implication for that is, but that apparently prevents the sheep from raising its nose and eating something above its head height. It can only really eat when it's got its head down, and that keeps it focused on the grass. So having sheep in your vineyards is a common thing to do nowadays in the wintertime. There's a guy in the States called Kelly Mulville who's got a ranch called Piscinus, which is entirely designed to have sheep all year round. And he has his leafing wire at nearly 2 meters, so he can drive quad bikes underneath and do everything he needs to do while the sheep can roam around the vineyards. And at this point, the sheep actually are positively beneficial because they eat any weeds. They also eat suckers, the sort of water shoots that grow out from the bottom of the vineyard, the vine that you have to sort of remove by hand, or it's quite an onerous task at some point to go and desucker your vines, but the sheep do it for you. And also, if the canes start growing downwards, when they reach about 2, 3, 4 feet off the ground, the sheep start eating them, so they can't grow lower. And that's a natural way of really preventing you having to do much work in your vineyard in the summer, because the sheep do most of your work for you. So lots of pros, lots of cons. A friend of mine called Gazina came on one of my courses, had done this piece of work on livestock in vineyards. I hope that she'll allow you to have a look at those slides because they're quite useful and quite interesting. There is the marketing effect of having sheep in your vineyard. You can borrow sheep for a little while. You have to be very careful. You have to be aware they can escape. You have to make sure you look after them properly and look after their welfare. Maybe have electric fencing. So it's complicated and you have to know what you're doing, but incorporating animals. But they're very good people to go and have a look at on Instagram would be Tablas Creek. So Jason Haas on the Tablas is a great communicator, and they do loads of things at Tablas which are really worthwhile, and they have 120 or so sheep and a couple of Pyrenean mountain dogs looking after them, and it's a lovely environment. And they have land where the sheep can go when they're not in the vines, so they can take them out when they don't need them. But they're one of the fairly few vineyards that's got their own flock. Gesina's study was talking to, a lot of growers in Central Europe about what sheep did for them. And the top thing that the growers said they did was vegetation control, summer and winter, really, really useful. And the second was fertilization effects, summer and winter. So, lots of positives for having sheep. Obviously, you've got to look after them and look after their welfare, and it can be complicated, and you have to be willing to do it. And in where I'm from in France, there's lots of little blocks of vineyards, and they're not separated from each other. There's no fences, so you could not have sheep in lots of parts of Europe because they just wander over your neighbour's vines, and that would be very unpopular. So you really have to be able to fence your vineyards to be able to put stock in. You can do it with other creatures. This is down at Tillingham. They've got a mobile chicken coop, and they pull a little mini one through the vineyards and move it a few meters every day. The chickens shit in a different place, and quite a lot of thoughtful, interesting things to be done with ducks and geese and other creatures. So it's not just all about sheep. One of the key questions I get asked quite a bit, which doesn't have an absolutely straightforward answer yet, is what is the quality effect on farming regeneratively? And we talked a bit before about biodynamics having a positive price correlation. I think as diploma students, you're probably all in agreement that some of the very finest wines in the world are made biodynamically. Whether you credit the practices, particularly the more esoteric ones, as being important in that, or whether it's just extremely thoughtful and careful owners who pay great attention to what they're doing and do everything well that makes the wine better, is still an open question. And it's going to be a long time before we can prove for sure that regen makes better quality. Jason Haas at Tablas was pretty convinced when they did blind tastings of the blocks they had converted first to biodynamics and then to regen, that they always did a blind tasting of all their blocks without knowing what they were. And it started emerging when they started looking at the ones that came out best. They were the ones that were furthest advanced down the biodynamic and regen route. I think there's people like Olivier Humbrecht in Alsace who switched to, he tried biodynamics and organics. And after 3 years, he just said, we're just switching everything to biodynamics, because that kind of level of attention to detail, the care of the soil, the look on the face of the guys who worked in the vineyards when they came back from treating and spraying, not having to peel off their hazmat suit, all those things just convinced him. And so he was also sure that the wine was getting better and better. So there was a lot of anecdotal evidence. I was down in Australia talking to Alkina. They're doing regen, very interesting work in Barossa on old vine Grenache blocks. And there's quite a lot of individual growers in different parts of the world starting to prove significant differences and higher quality. And their top wines are in their best regen blocks, and they're fetching $250, $300 a bottle for those wines. So the market seems to agree that they are making better wines. And to some other people who are farming regeneratively, I mean, just thinking about agriculture, one of the reasons this is so topical is that big ag in the States is going regen really fast. I think already there's more regenerative farms or hectares or acres under regen in America than there are organic. And that's in literally, pioneers were doing it 20 years ago, but it's really taken off in the last 5 years. And companies like McDonald's and General Mills and Nestle are saying, we're going to commit to regen because we really think it's important. Maybe there's a lower bar, and that's one of the reasons they find it attractive. But they are actually all, they all have people who work there who are sincerely trying to do the right thing and make a big difference. And they feel that the difference that they're making is quite significant. So wine's a little bit behind on regen, but ahead on biodynamics and other forms of good farming. The people who are avowedly following the regen path, Tablas, perhaps one of the poster boys, and actually some of the Perrin family who co-own Tablas, are starting to implement things in France. Paul Dolan, now at Truett Hurst, but was at Bonterra, and forgive me, I can't remember the name. Fletcher and Bonterra. He moved them to organic and then to biodynamic. I think they've now moved on to regen. Torres in Spain have converted a good 500 hectares to regenerative farming. Cheval Blanc, Galopé, Jackson Family Wines. There are lots and lots more. And in fact, the RVF website has, I'll show you in a minute, something called the RV Guide, which has now got a map of quite a lot of people who put their data in, so far entirely in a beta test. And we're officially launching it on Wednesday, so that the world's press will tell many more people about it. And I think we've got over 100 vineyards in there at the moment, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll have over 1,000 vineyards who are practicing in one way or another, at one degree or another, some regenerative practices. And we really hope that's going to build very quickly. So it's accelerating quickly, and people are getting on board and finding a lot to like about regen, because it is quite scientific and quite thoughtful. It's pragmatic, it's open to change. And I think people really want to do the right thing. And also their customers believe they should be doing the right thing, and they don't want to see the chemical cupboard, and they want to see their premium brands being good global citizens and doing the right thing. And I think that's part of the push towards practices like regen. Just at the MW Symposium in Germany in June last year, there was a fantastic session by a guy called Nacho Belda, and he produced a few slides, two of which I thought were really interesting. Quite detailed, again, fungal and bacterial communities and how they differ in different soils around the world. And this chart here, I think, is fascinating because it's groups of color-coded countries. So Spain is this green blob lot here. South Africa's sort of the yellow over here, States over here. Weirdly, Denmark and Germany, total outliers over here. Portugal here, Australia, total outliers over here. So what you can do by getting some soil, you can tell where it comes from by analyzing the microbiology, which is pretty exciting, because this may be one of the drivers behind terroir. We keep talking about terroir. Is it actually not the underlying bedrock and the soil composition, but actually is it the microbiology that's contributing or being an important part in terroir differences? Very, very early days, but really exciting. And then the other chart I thought was great was a study in Spain and a study in the USA, two different countries where they took lots of data. They had conventional growers, organic growers, and biodynamic growers, and they plotted them on the charts on the bottom left here. And so you can see they clustered to some extent, the biodynamics particularly quite different from the conventional and organic. And obviously there's quite a lot of overlap, and I don't know exactly what these refer to, but there's clearly something in the soil microbial communities that differentiates these forms of farming. And this chart on the right, I found astonishing, because here you have a sample of biodynamic viticulture, which just has a completely different appearance to the organic and conventional. And the conventional seem to be three separate groups of things that are entirely separate to each other. This is about the interconnected relationships, how closely connected the organisms in the soil are to each other. So there's things doing their own thing and not talking to each other in the conventional, but in the biodynamic particularly, there's this sort of interaction of things that are spending their entire time communicating with each other, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So quality and terroir may be a lot more to do with the soil microbial community than we currently know, and I think we're finding more and more and more about it. So look, as we come towards the end of the hour, I would just encourage any of you who are interested in this topic, who haven't already, just to go to regenerativeviticulture.org and join the mailing list, because that is the best way to keep up to speed. We send out a monthly newsletter and occasional updates on particular things. And we'd love to be able to talk to you and tell you what's going on. And if you go back and look through some of the past newsletters, there's some really, really good resources of things that will help you with the assignment. There is also the RV Guide, which is launching right now. And this is a screenshot taken a little while ago, but it's where the distribution of vineyards that have put their data in. One in India, great to see, and Brazil and Mexico, Canada, I think, but lots in the States, quite a few in Northern Europe, quite a few in France, and growing fast all the time. So as you go in, you should be able to see the name of the vineyard and the practices that they claim they're using. It's self-certified, so this is not a certification. It's people saying, okay, we do these things, but obviously anyone can go along and chat to them and find out what they're doing and have a look and say, well, you don't seem to do this. And so it's kind of exposed to public scrutiny, and therefore we think a really good place for people to share information, and a really good place for you to look up if you're a grower in Tuscany. Is there a near neighbor who is practicing animals in the vineyard? Could you go along and have a chat with them? This is what we hope this will provide the world's growers, and we're quite excited about the potential. I've got a few things to read. If you really you could just be that you just want to get this assignment out of the way and you don't really ever want to think about it again. And in that case, you could need to limit your intake of information about this. But if you're someone who's quite geeky, who just really wants to know more, I've been so stimulated and interested in learning about regenerative farming. There's so many great podcasts and so many great stories. It's, the way we consume food, the way we do things on this planet it has to change, and it is changing fast. And I think it's really interesting to plug into that. So I would first of all suggest do read or listen on the audiobook to Dirt to Soil, which is a guy called Gabe Brown. He's a redneck farmer in the States. He's not a hippie. And one of the reasons he's been really successful in helping growers in the States to believe in him is because he's a I think Republican voting redneck farmer who's just gone, oh my God, this is so logical. You've just got to do this. I've saved so much money. I've integrated so many different businesses. I've now got a thriving, profitable business on my farm, which was a desert 15 years ago. Really worth understanding his journey. It's a great Kiwi soil expert called McHale Masters, who's written an excellent book called For the Love of Soil. Again, audiobook is a great way to consume it if you're not a great reader, or you find you go to sleep when you read books, which I often do. Canadian lady called Suzanne Simard, who's brought up on the West Coast in the logging industry. Her dad was a logger. Had completely revolutionized our thinking about how plants grow and the fact that they communicate with each other underground. And you may remember, 10 years ago, the expression the wood wide web got bandied around. And that was her work that kind of proved quite how plants talk to each other underground through the mycorrhizal network. Really interesting, very scientific based, but it's also a personal story and her personal journey through life and motherhood and actually health issues, and it ties together very, very well with her scientific work. So that's a good read. One of the most fascinating books I've ever read, Merlin Sheldrake's Entangled Life, all about fungi, completely madly interesting. You will not regret buying and reading that because it's just full of extraordinary information. Jamie Good wrote, when I did the slide, a small guide to regenerative viticulture, which is very well worth reading. And if you haven't got it already and you're doing this assignment, why haven't you got it? I would definitely suggest you buy it. It's the primer to a longer book that he's now just published, I think called The New Viticulture, which goes into quite a lot more detail. But actually, I think for this assignment, you get a lot that you might need in regenerative viticulture. And well worth having a look at that. I mentioned towards the beginning that there is this event at Everflight, Beacon Road, Ditchling, on Thursday. It's in the morning, 9:30 to 1:30. Lovely place. If you can get down there, I'll be there, and we can certainly chat there. And then this isn't relevant for the assignment because it's after the assignment, so I think it needs to be handed in. But in early September, there is a wonderful place down in Sussex called West Dean, which is a college where they teach the most extraordinary range of topics, art and craft being the primary part of it, but gardening and all sorts of other really rather wonderful things. And we're now doing a couple of wine courses down there, including an introduction to regenerative viticulture, which is effectively 2 days. I think it's a Sunday night, Monday night, but the core teaching time is the Monday and Tuesday on regenerative viticulture in September. So we'll be working with a local vineyard to bring that alive, and I think that would be a really useful thing if you want to know a bit more, or tell any friends you have who want to really go deep into it, come along to that. So those two things that I'm involved in, and there's absolutely loads more information on the RVF website and on the mailing list. So I very strongly suggest you join that. So I've probably talked long enough now. My voice has held up reasonably well. I'm just going to have a look at the comments, and if anyone wants to chip in with a question, and is there anything that's burning that we ought to be talking about?
Yes, thanks, Justin. The chat is sort of me saying various things, so don't worry about that. I can read out the two questions that we have had for you, and for the benefit of those on the replay, I think helpful if I read them out. So the first question was, what are the certifying bodies for RV?
Well, that's a really good question, and a very topical one, because 2 years ago there were 0 certification bodies. There are now, I think, at least 5. A really good place to look is on the RVF website. There is, in that 16 practices plus certification and glossary, there's a whole page on certification, which first of all says, do you certify or don't you certify? What are the pros and cons? And we've decided as a foundation to be certification neutral. So we don't advocate that you should certify or that you don't need to certify. We think there's a lot of useful things you can get from certifying, but equally certifying. Last year at Groundswell, I heard Helen Browning from the Soil Association, and she said the Soil Association has been going since, I think, the 30s it started. Group of people gathering together to work out how to farm better, who eventually realized that rejecting chemicals was the right way, and they took them a long time. I think it took them until the 70s to actually formulate what organic viticulture should be legally constituted as. And she said that was a really useful time to spend thinking about it. And she said she's really excited about regen, even though it's not necessarily organic, and she espouses organic, because it's changing so quickly and it's learning so fast. And there are so many people just trying different things in different places. And the experimentation is one of the most energizing things about it. And her view was, if regen certifies too early, it's a bit like someone coming down from the mountain with 10 things you've got to do. You then have to do that the rest of time, because that's now inscribed on a tablet. It's a bit like, Maria Thun writing down Rudolf Steiner's lectures and now saying, well, that's biodynamics. When I spoke to Gobi in the Roussillon, he said, oh, well, it's not nonsense, but it's completely irrelevant down here in Catalonia. What Steiner was recommending for people growing in market gardens in Germany in the 1920s, he said, just half the things are completely irrelevant down here. So he says, I do what I do. And he said, if Steiner was a Catalan, he'd be doing what I'm doing. He's worked out how to make, so he has to do the 501 and the preparations that are kind of mandatory to get the certification. A couple of them he doesn't believe in, but he does them because he wants to be certified. But he does loads of other things that are his own invention. And so I think the trouble with certifying is you set things in stone too early. So we are very well aware, and some very good certifications out there that are very well thought through. I think there's 5 or 6 on the website. The first one was the ROC, the Regenerative Organic Certification, which is outside wine, covers lots of agriculture. First mover advantage, pretty good, but definitely says you have to be organic in order to be certified regenerative organic. There is one that the Torres guys kicked off in Spain, Viticultura Regenerativa, and that has a kind of 2-stage approach, so you can definitely start without yet being organic. But I think to get fully certified, you need to eventually become organic. But that's worth having a look. And then there's A Greener Planet, there's Regenified, which is Gabe Brown's certification. I can't remember all the other ones, but they're on the website. And the pros and cons are gone into for each one. So it's well worth having a look there and informing yourself about what's out there.
That sounds like a great resource. So thank you for highlighting everything that's available on the website. We had another question. Does the vegetative growth of the vines also increase significantly when they're farmed regeneratively? If so, does one need to adapt canopy management to get the plant into equilibrium for optimal fruit development?
I suppose the answer to that is it depends on what you're doing before. If you were fertilizing your vines chemically, then you will be having a lot of canopy growth, and regen, the amount of available nitrogen is probably quite a lot lower. So you would have less growth. But if you get your soil working well and you have a nitrogen source and nitrogen fixing going on in your soil, and you have microbes that do provide a stream of nitrogen, then you should have healthy canopy growth. I suppose the answer to that is it's quite hard. It's quite context dependent, and it depends on the water availability and all sorts of other things. So it's quite hard to be specific about it. But the idea is to have a vine that's really in balance and healthy. And I guess any change that you make being a holistic discipline, will require you to think about everything that you do and why you do it. And some of the things you do will probably be advantageous if you did change them. But one of the advantages of this is that you can give it a go on a few rows and do it differently on a few other rows, and then measure. And one of the most exciting things about all the people involved in Regen that I admire is that they do regularly different things and test and measure. And they're always thinking, and they're always trying to work out what works for them. And they end up working out the best answer for them.
Thank you. I had a couple of things just to check with you. First of all, just for those of you who are attending my workshop on D6 technique tomorrow, and if you're not attending, then let me know if you'd like to sign up for that one as well. But one of the important things from the examiner's point of view is that we cover a very wide range of sources, and we don't use all our examples, from one area. So Justin, that was very helpful when you showed us the map of, where people are practicing regen across the world. Do you know of any other sources like that where people can find a broad variety of different examples, or would that be the main resource?
Well, I think one of the reasons we created it was we felt that there wasn't anywhere. I mean, just the brief history of the RVF is that Stephen Cronk, who founded a very, very successful Provence rosé brand called Mirabeau, initially by sourcing wine from growers and cooperatives and blending and making extremely delicious, well-made brand. After several years of growing that to, I don't know, 2 million bottles, something of that size, decided that the time had come to actually put vines in the ground or buy some land with vines. And 4 or 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, bought Domaine Mirabeau, which is now the home of Mirabeau. At the time, he wanted to switch to organic, but then realized fairly quickly that he read around the subject quite a lot, that organic wasn't going to cut it, and the problem with copper toxicity and ploughing was going to mean he had quite unhealthy soil. So he researched about it, found Mimi Castile in Oregon, had a chat with her, met a Danish permaculturist who has a house in his village in Cotignac, and the three of them said, "Well, where is the information about regen?" There isn't any. There was a little bit here and there in papers, and if you Google, you could find something, but there was very little. So they just said, "Well, why don't we find somewhere where you can go and learn?" And so that's why the RVF got founded around about 3 years ago. And it's taken us a little while to get to be that place, but I think it's probably the best place to go for that kind of information. There's all sorts of great people doing great work in other fields. Lots of sustainability organizations, people like Napa Green in the States, who have some great regenerative practices as part of what they're espousing, and some great resources and good information. But I guess, we're trying to be the one-stop shop for information about regen. And it's early days. We now have 1 employee. We have 1 other person who works with us part-time, and then 8 trustees. So between us, we've, I think, done a good job to create something that's really meaningful, and watch this space as the guide takes off, and I think more wineries know about it and start putting their information in. I think it'll build its own momentum.
Yeah, and you've obviously caught the eye of WSET because they're always looking for hot topics for coursework.
Absolutely. Well, and also one of our missions is to educate the educators, because those are the people who are teaching the next generation of viticulturists, and the winemaking schools and viticulture colleges. We're trying to make sure that they tend to have quite a traditional, like, science-based way of teaching, and lecturers who've been there for 10 or 15 years who just teach it this way, and a lot of them don't know about regen, or only just finding out. So part of our mission is very much to kind of get those guys and go, "Hey, this is really important and interesting. You need to add it to your curriculum." And we're so pleased when the WSET put it on, and I was really pleased to go out to the symposium in Germany this summer for the MW symposium, and also go and teach some students in Australia in January. Had a very interesting time out there, and this when we got to go to Alkina. So there's a lot of interest in regen around the world, and it seems to be really bubbling up now. So we're delighted that the diploma has seen fit to this generation of students will all become highly knowledgeable about it, which is fantastic.
Absolutely. I know you said, Justin, that you weren't going to go into too much depth on the commercial advantages and disadvantages. And I suppose you did really touch upon that, you know, as you spoke through your presentation. But I was wondering, just for those who would like a quick kind of overview, could you list, maybe just in short form, a couple of the key advantages and disadvantages from your point of view, just because that is specifically referenced in the assignment? I think that would be really helpful.
Definitely. No, for sure. No, it's important, and there perhaps isn't enough great evidence yet out there that's been collated. And I know one of our key missions is to find evidence that's convincing, that shows people, gosh, I should do this too. There's a guy called John Kempf who's got a podcast, the Regenerative Agriculture podcast, and he's an incredibly experienced consultant who travels around mostly in the States, but outside the States also. And he says there is not a single farm that he's been to that he hasn't made more profitable by installing regenerative practices. Now, he would say that, wouldn't he? Because he's a regen guy. But essentially the formula is input costs massively down, because you're just not spending money on all these really expensive chemicals. And you think about the oil price and what happens to fertilizer prices, because that's incredibly oil price dependent and gas price dependent. You know, you look at the wheat price. You've watched Clarkson's Farm. Worth watching Clarkson's Farm, because he's farming with Andy Cato now, who's one of the leading regen guys in the UK, who incidentally was a one half of Groove Armada, the cool band of the, I don't know, early 2000s, late 90s. Wow. He cashed in his chips and went and bought a farm in France and farmed regen, and now he's back in the UK, and he has a brand called Wild Farmed. So it's a regeneratively grown wheat, which is getting a premium. So this feeds back into that question about finances. If you sell your product for a premium, and if you have lower costs in producing it, you make more money. The question is then, does your yield go up or down? If you talk to John Kempf, he will say very often the yield goes up. Don't think this is proven in wine yet, so let's not get too excited. Because you are liberating the ecosystem is doing the work for you. Rather than you having to buy expensive chemicals to boost your yields, you can get a very healthy vineyard that does the work for you. It also becomes more resilient to shocks, to droughts. If you looked at the rainstorms in California, I mean, they had a drought for a long time, and then they had terrible rain. And you looked at Jason Haas's post about his own vineyards versus his neighbours. They were standing with water. His were completely dry because the water just gone into the soil. Because it's a great thing you can do. This is worth looking up on the internet. I forget what you'd have to call it. Soil, a rainfall test. Yeah, look up a rainfall test online. And essentially it's a sprinkler sprinkling water onto 4 or 5 or 6 identical pieces of, well, not identical trays containing earth from different fields that have been bare soil, fields that have been farmed intensively, and right the way through to highly regenerative soils. You pour the water on top. The bare soil, the water goes straight through and comes out really muddy. Or it runs straight, no, actually, yes, I lie, it runs straight off the top. And there's a catcher that catches the water that just, you angle the slope, the water just falls off, carries all the mud with it, and you end up with this pot full of mud really quickly. And the one underneath it that's getting the water that's meant to be percolating through, it's got nothing in it, it's dry. At the other end, where it's full of lovely plant life with deep-rooted plants, nothing runs off. It lands on it and nothing, or bare, a few drips run off. But after a few minutes, it all soaks through, and then about half the amount of water comes out, and it's almost crystal clear. So it's a really worthwhile thing to look at, just to see the effect of what that healthy soil and plants will do when it rains. So you'll have a more resilient vineyard that's more resistant to drought, more stable when it comes to water. Your vines last longer. Your quality hopefully is better. Your yield is at least stable and probably close to what it was before, possibly higher, but with high quality. And these are easy statements to make, and individual people will often tell you about their successes and not about their failures. So I'm under no illusions that there will be people who've said, oh, we tried something and it really didn't work. We talked before about cover crops in hot climates. The Roussillon, where I make wine, has been incredibly dry for the last nearly 3 years now. It's just been raining a bit recently, which is great. But if you have a vineyard, you leave your cover crop, and you have a vineyard next door where you kill the cover crop by ploughing it in or by cutting it or by disking under the soil, and then you have a very dry summer, the one that's got the cover crop in it, the whatever rain falls, the cover crop will tend to take up, and you'll get a lower yield of grapes, and that is quite commonly repeated. But if you keep going and you build up healthy soil life after 4 or 5 years, you'll probably have a higher yield in the regenerative block than in the one where you have destroyed your cover crop. But it does depend on the year. A really, really dry year, can cause you problems. So these things are not yet absolutely cut and dried, and there's lots of data out there, but it's all kind of anecdotal. One of the things the RVF has been doing is what's called a literature review, which is looking at all the scientific papers out there and trying to summarize and evaluate them to say there have been really good studies done in New Zealand, in Canada, in Italy that have shown, what scientific studies tend to do is look very closely at one small thing and show a difference or not. But to have a literature review is to sort of summarize that and to say that the weight of work in this area is showing this or that. So I haven't yet seen the results of that, and I'm also not sure I've got the time to read through everything when that comes out. But I think Alistair, who's one of our trustees, Alistair Nesbitt, has done a lot of work on that, and I think it's just awaiting publication before we put it on the website. So look out for that in the, I don't know, not too distant future. If you join the mailing list, we'll certainly tell you if that goes live and becomes viewable.
Okay. So that would be a really useful list of sources for students, wouldn't it? Just to have that all in one place, even if they don't read everything on it.
Yeah.
So I suppose what you would then say is that a potential commercial disadvantage is the time that it could take to have a positive commercial effect, so if you are not in a position, if you don't have the capital to invest in that and the opportunity to wait for that to bear fruit, so to speak, then you could struggle commercially.
I think there's a possibility that you could make a few wrong calls and have a tough time early on. One thing I think it's very fair to say in most regenerative systems is actually quite cheap. You don't have to buy lots of expensive stuff. It's time intensive, so you have to have the time to put in to learn and understand and apply and test and properly measure to build the knowledge. That's where it takes the time, and the people who are pioneering and doing the best work are the most interested people who are just fascinated to do that because they want to know, and the slightly lazier grower who just wants to count the check at the end of the day and sell the grapes for the best price. It's a bit harder for them to invest the time in doing that if they're not intrinsically very interested in it. So there is a knowledge bump, but this is very much what we're trying to lower by making it easy. And our future plans are to make more videos and films and how to bits of information to help people along. And the RV guide, when you answer the questions about your practices, it says if you want to know more about this, click here, watch this, do that, and provides kind of low barrier to entry knowledge to help people understand about it.
Excellent. So those of you who are here live, this is your chance to ask Justin if you have any other questions. While we wait to see if any other questions come in, Justin, I just wanted to check with you. You mentioned quite a lot of names and resources in addition to the ones that you had put on the screen. So I will do my best to sort of find links for all of those for everyone, but are you happy to kind of provide some of those if I miss any?
Definitely, yes. If you have trouble finding something, just tell me and I will send you a link. If you're not sure, if you have a look and you can't find it, and I should be able to link you up. So Piscinus Ranch, for instance, I can find you a link. Having said that, a lot of the stuff's on the IVF website. So
okay, great. So
that might be a good place to start.
Live or replay, when I get round to sending you out a list of the links that Justin referenced, then if there's anything I've missed, please do inform me and I will add that as well. Because you mentioned so many great names, and I know that, as I said, a lot of being successful in an assignment like this is showing the diversity and the range of sources that you've consulted. So although the RVF website isn't massively helpful resource, the examiners won't accept that as your only reference. You've got to kind of follow each of the links, so Justin's talking about Tablas Creek, I had a little Google of Tablas Creek, looking at what Jason's doing, and I found the Tablas Creek blog, which Jason writes. And that's another example of a source that you could look into, reference. Diversity and breadth of references is incredibly important. So yeah, I think I've kind of covered everything that I wanted to just to pick up on after your presentation. And just thank you so much, Justin. I think it's, as you say, it is such an exciting topic, a brilliant topic for WSET to have chosen, because people can really get their teeth into this. And as you also say, it'll help a new generation of diploma graduates be very knowledgeable about this, and hopefully many of them will be ambassadors for the cause as well.
Well, thank you all for listening. And I would say it's been a hell of a lot of information in a short period of time. And knowing the way I learn, can I just make an analogy? It's a bit like pouring water on soil that isn't quite ready for it. And it's very easy for a lot of the water to slide off and not sink in. So it depends on how prepared your brain is for this information. But it's well worth rewatching it. It's also well worth slowing down a bit and doing a bit of that reading and that background work, listening to some podcasts, because this is fascinating stuff. There's plenty to know. And if people do want to have a more in-depth chance to engage with it, I would go and visit some people who are doing interesting things. Do try to come to wherever you are. If there's someone, have a look on the map. If there's anyone near you, go and have a chat with them. Get a spade and dig it into the ground somewhere near where you live, and handle the soil for a bit, smell it, get to know what soil is. It's fascinating what's in there. And you can, I'll tell you what you can do. You get a handful of soil, you shake it up in a kind of tall jar, a tall bottle, and then with a lot of water, and then you let it settle. And what you'll find is the heavy stuff sits at the bottom, and then the middle stuff sits in the middle, and then the very light silty stuff sits on the top. And you can effectively see layers where they are effectively sand, silt, and clay. And those are the three components of soil. All soil is made up of a combination of sand, silt, and clay, plus organic matter. I think the best way to learn is to physically do something yourself. And if you really want to teach yourself about this stuff, get stuck in, get your hands in the soil, and get learning. A very good website, Sector Mentor, we talked about that. That's something to look up. They have incredibly good resources online for helping you do soil tests. And very good videos, very good how-to examples of how to do a spade test, how to do an infiltration test, how to do a worm count. Well worth actually doing some of those things to get to know a little bit more about it.
How did you spell that website?
Sector Mentor, SECTOR MENTOR.
Sector Mentor, lovely. And we just had a message in the chat to say that there's a podcast with Jason Haas about RV on wine for normal people, episode 440. Thank you, Angelica, for sharing that.
And there's also gosh, what's it called? I mean, I'd talk about other diploma educators. There's a few other podcasts out there. Becky Sykes, who works for the RVF, who's our main employee and program director. She's done a 3-part podcast, which is very worth listening to, on the UK Wine Show. I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, I'm sure people have already been researching these things. So yeah, no, I'm all about the broadest possible range of sources. So yes, please do. UK Wine Show.
There is a lot out there. And again, the RVF website and the newsletters and the historical newsletters written by Becky. She's really good at sort of showcasing the mustn't miss bits. I think the MW symposium session is there. That's got Mimi Castile talking for 15 minutes about how life emerged in the first place and why we're all interconnected. It's got Abby Rose, who has the Farmerama podcast, who is also the creator of Sector Mentor, talking about how you measure soil. It's got me talking similar things to what I talked about this evening, but actually I tried to make sure the slides are quite different. It's got Jamie Good talking about vineyards around the world who are doing interesting things. That's an hour and a half, but I think really worth your time.
It's on the IMW events page, right?
IMW events page, yes, under the symposium, last year, 2023. And
visit mastersofwine.org and look for events. I also, when you were talking, Justin, I Googled Kelly Mulville and I found an appearance on a podcast called, oh my goodness, I've written it somewhere here. Oh, I screenshotted it. That's it. So I thought that was really interesting. And what I also thought was interesting in what you said, and this could be useful for everybody watching, is that where there don't exist examples or where there isn't enough evidence specifically from the field of regenerative viticulture, you can extrapolate to a certain extent from what's being done in the wider agricultural sector, I think. So I thought that was quite interesting. That you said, oh, there isn't yet the evidence from viticulture, but there's a lot of work being done already. So worth, as you say, getting an understanding of the field in general. So the one I found with Kelly Mulville was on the Organic Wine podcast, episode 87 from series 3, and it's called Regenerative Grazing-Based Viticulture. So have a look for that. But,
Yeah.
I'll try and share all of this as well in links. It might take me a bit to assemble it, but I will get it to you. I promise those of you who are watching.
Okay. And our fellow trustee, Mimi Castile, also hosts a podcast. I think it's called the Market Garden No-Till podcast or something like that. And she has quite a few conversations with interesting wine growers who grow grapes regeneratively in Burgundy and in other places. So I haven't listened to them all, I have to confess, but they're very much worth listening to. And Mimi is a very inspiring person who has some really interesting. She's got a forestry background, scientific, but she's extremely observational in her, and she's developed her own understanding of what she does. She's really worth listening to because she's quite inspiring.
Lovely. That's great. Thank you so much, Justin. If anybody didn't manage to attend live and is full of questions, then please email me your questions and I'll see if Justin's able to add a little bit of extra perspective after the event. Otherwise we'll sign off for today, and wishing you all great luck with your research, and thanks again, Justin.
Pleasure, real pleasure. Thank you all for listening, and yeah, go for it. Do a really good assignment. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah. Lovely. Thanks for all the thank you messages coming in, and glad it was helpful, and wishing you all a great rest of your day wherever you are in the world. See you soon.
Bye-bye.